Happy Tuesday, guys, but more importantly, happy World Series Day, World Series Game 1. Look, I think we look at this from the picture, guys, from the start. Dave, we've been doing this show every single day. At least I was on the weekdays. 60-game season. You and I had the KBO show together. Everybody was asking us, are we going to have an MLB season? Are we going to have it? Is it going to happen? And you and I said, hey, look, we don't know. We can't predict the future. We're going to do whatever we can control. We got through the 60 games. We got through most of the playoffs. Here we are in the World Series. And most importantly, it's interesting because it's the two top teams. It's the two teams that mathematically and on paper should be here in this spot. Dave, how you feeling here, Game 1, World Series?
Well, I mean, I'm excited for it. It's the World Series, and you just kind of summed it up. Teams that were the number one seeds in their respective leagues got through their series, both in pretty exciting fashion. And here we go. It should be a terrific series. I think you've got a managerial edge on the Tampa Bay side, personnel edge on the other side, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and something that really doesn't really have too much to do with the actual game itself here, Brian, in this matchup. But I wanted to mention the Rays finished 28th in team payroll, $28.3 million this season, have a chance to now take down three of the four richest clubs: Yankees 109, Dodgers 108, Astros 82. Kind of a cool story there, Brian.
It definitely is. And from my own perspective, growing up in Cleveland, our teams are always low payroll until the Indians got to the point where they were consistently one of the better teams in baseball. Then the payroll rose. But it's in my blood that I root for the underdogs when it comes to low payrolls. I like to see the Twins win. I like to see Tampa Bay win. The teams, maybe it was growing up with Steinbrenner with the Yankees, where anytime we had a good player, Steinbrenner would buy him from us, basically give us some minor leaguers that never worked out. That's the Cleveland. That's why he works in Cleveland. But I was rooting for Tampa all the way, and Dave was right. I mean, these are two of the most exciting series coming into this. They could have gone either way. A lot of times, people thought one of the teams was written off, and it just shows how hard it is to win a 7-game series in Major League Baseball.
Definitely. It doesn't really matter exactly how you get there, just a matter of getting here. And a couple different stories, but it's all really the same. Two top teams. Steve, how you feeling here heading into the World Series Game 1?
Well, that big sigh of relief, that big exhale we heard across the nation on Sunday night was Major League Baseball when the Dodgers won. I think they would much rather have them here in this matchup than the Braves-Rays. Although Atlanta actually is a real fun team to watch. I think both Atlanta and the Dodgers would have been a better World Series maybe, because that's a great matchup just with the offenses. I don't know if they'd rather have had Houston than Tampa, but Houston came close to getting it done, down 0-3, almost pulled it off. I think Dodgers-Houston probably was the preferred matchup for Major League Baseball, but then again, they don't have to worry about the cheating scandal be talked about anymore on national TV. So I think they're happy to have the Dodgers here, to say the least. And the Dodgers showed who they were. They're a capable team. They were down 2-0 in Game 7 and still found a way to win that one. Down 1-3 in the series, of course, is the big picture takeaway. You know, we'll dig into these games, guys, but something I don't want to forget to mention as we get into it. Keep in mind the Braves and Dodgers just played 7 games of this same field. Tampa has not. Not sure that's much of a handicapping edge, but it is something interesting to point out, is the Dodgers may be a little more familiar with this ballpark now.
And we'll certainly find that out, I'd say, pretty early on in this series. But, Steve, we'll start in reverse order here. Before we dive into these games, World Series Game 1, total, sides, prop bets, get into the comments from YouTube, Periscope, Facebook, from all over. Not just for the baseball tonight, Steve, but anything you have going, whether it's NFL, college football, let us know. We can grab from you over at WagerTalk.com.
Yeah, going to have the baseball game up after we do the show here today, and that's the only big game in town today and tomorrow. So going to have baseball the next couple days most likely, and then I'll be digging into the football Thursday on. Had first losing week in college football in quite a while, and it figures as I had a big play. And, of course, that's the kiss of death, as we all know. But the 9-1 college football run came to an end on Saturday. Had West Virginia, and they give up a 92-yard touchdown return, meaningless. And that was kind of how that day went for me, just in a nutshell. But it just shows why the subscriptions are so important more than the daily picks. And I know guys love to jump on and buy single picks, one-day packages. But look, Dave, Brian, and I have all been doing this for 20-plus years. Andrew, I know you're new to the game, but you take a long-term approach as well. And it's actually a really good time to bounce back after off a weekend like that. So I expect a big turnaround this weekend, Saturday and Sunday football.
Definitely, that's all you can really ask for. You know, you have selling these packages daily, Steve, but we have the weekly, monthly, 90-day. Dave stresses it the most, and I also talk about it quite a bit. And, a good example of it yet is today for me this morning. 2-0 sweep in the Korean baseball. Only advertised the 4% play. 3% play was a free play, but had another play up there for the all access. And that's kind of how it works. You're not going to get every single play out unless you're an all access guy, just getting that right to your email. So for myself, we're getting near the playoffs in the Korean baseball, and it's funny. I was saying earlier that it almost seems like the KBO has lapped the MLB because MLB had just 60 games. So although just 10 teams in the Korean baseball organization, they're each playing each other 16 times. So I'm delivering with a free play most weekdays now on the Free Sports Picks TV with WagerTalk, and I have a best bet up here. Probably going to post that this afternoon, just waiting on a couple more things. And KBO has been great. Now it's, I think, plus 47% ROI since July 18th in the Korean baseball. So that'll be stepping up in the playoffs, and NFL should be posted at least one play later on this afternoon. But I do not have a play in game one. A couple props I'm interested in, though, and looking forward to hear what these guys have to say. Brian, you and I were talking off air before we started off this show. Anything that you have posted right now at wagertalk.com?
Yeah, until the game goes off tonight, I've got the series. I've got a bet in the series in Major League Baseball. Similar to Steve, my weekend went similar to the West Virginia. I did have West Virginia on Saturday, one of my three plays. Then I had the Houston Texans on Sunday, one of my three plays. And it was a bad weekend, obviously, with those two. But it happens. We just got to bounce back. And right now, just the series in baseball up. I haven't done any football as of yet.
I did okay over the weekend. And this will tie into when I talk about the packages and the all access. The key was the Pittsburgh-Miami game. And I didn't sell this game individually, but I ended up with both sides in the same game and cashed 2 tickets. Information was out early. Wasn't real public that the Pitt quarterback was dicey, was listed as questionable with an ankle problem. I've got some good contacts, and this is one of the benefits of being an old geezer. I know everybody, and the information was he's not playing. Okay, he's not going to play, and so I'm going to jump on Miami minus 10 or 10.5 because once that information gets out there, the line's going up. And I didn't like the game either way. The whole idea was to set up a potential 3-point middle. 2.5. If it's 2.5 or better on a college game of minus 20 or less, if I can do it, I'm going to take it every time because you're risking a very small amount to win a lot. And sure enough, the line went up, ceilinged at 14. There was some resistance there, and 13.5 was probably the more widely available. So at WagerTalk, for the all access guys, they ended up with Miami minus 10.5, Pittsburgh plus 13.5. Game landed on 12. How sweet it is!
You can't argue with that, Dave.
That's a 7% gain for about not even a 1% investment, because the most you're going to lose is a tiny bit of vig, and instead hit a 4% on Miami, 3% on Pittsburgh, and you hit one of those every once in a while. It's going to be a good week.
Is it something you do often, Dave? Is that something you do
well,
often?
I wish I could do it often, but you don't get. It's got to be based on information, and you don't get information like that all the time. Wish I did, but I got good information on Pickett. It turned out to be completely. You have to know the source too. It turned out to be very legitimate. He didn't play. The backup actually played pretty well, but you just have to wait for it and be patient. It happens more in college basketball than any other sport, and again, it's a matter of contacts. Thankfully, I've got great contacts on the West Coast, like the Big Sky and the West Coast Conference, and if something's going on there, I usually find out about it pretty quickly. Anyway, decent weekend. The only spoiler was that horrible loser on the Texans plus the points. I mean, everything that was a Murphy's Law finish. Whatever, there had to be a whole big combination of things to go wrong to lose that one on the spread, but I did. And fortunately won the 49ers at night, so got out of the NFL even. and we move on. I'm ready to go with game one.
Well, you know what? Why don't we just keep you going, Dave? You've been doing this show, it sounds like, for 90 days straight, it seems. Why don't we let you tee
I haven't
things
missed
up
the show
for us
yet.
and give us the breakdown, give us the preview here from a betting perspective of game one of the World Series.
Right. And that's the key, is the betting perspective, because if I could have the game and pick them, I'd love the Dodgers in this spot, but unfortunately it's minus 170, and I'm not going to bet it. But here's why I like the Dodgers. Good point about this being the second straight series for them there. I think that is a little bit of a plus that I hadn't even factored in, to be honest with you. So that's a good note on that, Steve. But I like the matchup. Glasnow, he's a terrific pitcher, and he gets his strikeouts. But he is vulnerable to the long ball. In fact, very vulnerable to the long ball. During the regular season, his home run to fly ball ratio was 23%. It's gone up in the playoffs. It's 31%. That's exceptionally high. And he's going against a team that makes good contact. This is not a team that goes up there and just swings away, flails away, and gets a lot of strikeouts. So Glasnow's going to get his strikeouts here. I mean, if he pitches 5 innings, he's liable to get 6 or 7 strikeouts. But there's going to be some contact. And given his tendencies, I would not be surprised if the Dodgers take him out of the park a couple of times. And the flip side of it is Tampa's going to face a very good lefty in Kershaw. I know Kershaw's postseason resume isn't the best, but if you've looked at the way he's pitched this postseason, he probably got left in a little too long last game out. Outside of that, his numbers have been really good. And he'll get swings and misses against the Tampa team that swings and misses all the time. I mean, it's just amazing how often this team strikes out, and actually how poorly they've hit in the postseason, with the exception of the amazing Randy Arozarena. The rest of the team's hitting like 180. It's just not a very good matchup for the Rays in this particular game. Now, I'm looking for spots to bet Tampa, and hopefully game 2 is going to offer me something, because I think Snell could be really tough on the Dodgers, being a lefty, and we don't know who the Dodgers are going to go with, but it's probably going to be kind of a bullpen mix for the Dodgers in game 2. So that might be the spot to take Tampa, even at a lower price. In this game, I make the Dodgers a substantial favorite, but I don't make them 170. And I'm still a real stickler for value. To me, there just isn't any at 170. I just can't play the game at that price.
And that's just the thing, Brian. We talk about from a betting perspective and looking at these numbers. I know you mentioned that you do have a serious wager on this, so I won't really push you to make any prediction as far as that goes. We can get everyone to head over to WagerTalk to grab that. But when you look at this game from a game 1 standpoint, we talk about the pitching matchup. We can go through all the stats. We can tee it up as much as we want to. But from a short and sweet betting perspective, I like the Dodgers in game 1 as well. But as far as this number goes, how do you exploit this to get, a better number?
Yeah. What I'm looking at here is Tampa does have an advantage. They finished a day earlier, so they've got an extra day off, which helps their bullpen. And we all know that's the key ingredient here, is the Tampa Bay bullpen, going up against the Dodgers bullpen that is at times struggled, but at other times, take a look at the personnel in their careers. They've got guys that have been really good. They've got 3 or 4 guys that have closed before. So the Dodgers bullpen is still good. You mentioned Tampa hasn't played here before, and Tampa's never even been here before. It's the first season for Texas there, and I think that is an advantage. It's one of the things I looked at here was they hadn't played there before, and we saw some of in the playoffs. There was a few times on home runs where, depending on what field it was, the outfielder would jump to try to route the home run, and he didn't set himself up well because he hadn't played there before. And considering nowadays that there's so many home runs in Major League Baseball, that is a concern for Tampa, playing in a park they haven't played in before. When you take a look at the offense, Tampa Bay against lefties is actually better against lefties than they are against righties. When you look at the WRC plus, they've been one of the best teams against lefties. The Kershaw, as Dave pointed out, to me, it's always his fault because he's the pitcher of record, but he was in the game too long, and I could tell it. Everybody could tell it.
I know. Yep.
He kept him in there. And if you go back and look at Kershaw over the years, I mean, I think last year he performed well. The year before, not so much, but he's had certain years where he just got bombed. Every other year, he's got an ERA 4 or less. So it's been there's certain games that have come out in the playoffs where it just hurt them. But the advantage, I think, for the Dodgers here, and Dave touched on this regarding the home run. Tampa, in that last series, all they hit was home runs, and they couldn't develop any get the guys on base and move them along, which is what Tampa should be doing. When you've got a team that doesn't hit a lot of home runs and you strike out like Tampa does, that's a major concern here, especially with all the 100-mile-an-hour pitchers that the Dodgers have in that bullpen, and they've got a lot of talent there. So that's a concern for me. I went back and I took a look, and one of the guys that is really good in baseball, a friend of mine back from Cleveland, Adam Burke, he's got a daily show, and he talked about going back and digging into the actual hitting stats. When you take a look at barrels per plate appearance, the speed of the ball coming off the bat, hard hit percentages, the Dodgers were like number 1, number 2 in everything all season long. And if you watch the Dodgers, they're swinging for the fences, but as Dave pointed out, they don't strike out nearly as much as Tampa did. And I think that's one of the reasons why Houston was able to stay in that last series, because Houston's a team that doesn't strike out like that.
Yeah.
So when you got one team that's got the payroll and got the elite players and they don't strike out as much, and you got another team that is swinging for the fences, but they're not home run hitters, I think the Dodgers, you got to find ways to play the Dodgers in this series, individual games, because the home runs are key. We've seen it all along in these playoffs. There are no teams that, Atlanta did a pretty good job of moving around the bases, stealing bases and that kind of thing. And that worked out well against the Dodgers. I don't think Tampa's going to be able to do that. And so as much as I like Tampa and I love the way they play, I think they're just outclassed here.
Comment here from TJ and Dave. I know you thought this was quite a bit interesting.
Yeah, this is interesting. Well, it is interesting. And you can read the comment there, guys. How does that factor into this? Because Kershaw doesn't throw the big heat anymore. But he does mix up his pitches extremely well, and he commands them really well. So the asterisk I would put on the comment is how much of that was against pitchers who don't generate a lot of swings and misses anyway, whereas Kershaw does. I mean, look, I understand completely about his shaky postseason resume, but this guy's still a great pitcher when he's on. And he has looked to me like he's been on in the playoffs so far. I mean, assuming there's no back issues that get him out of the game early, I would think he'll pitch well tonight. The big question for me is it really is the biggest question that's not in the line. If it comes down to 1 or 2 moves in game, I give Cash an edge over Roberts. He's just a better in-game manager. And let's also remember, while I'm saying that, I like the Dodgers, I didn't bet the Dodgers. Somebody's saying, did I take the Dodgers? I didn't take the Dodgers. I like the Dodgers in this game. The Dodgers are lucky to be here. The Braves literally ran themselves out of 2 very possible wins in Game 5 and Game 7 with tremendous base running blunders that changed the game. The one in Game 7 was just staggering. I mean, I'll forgive Ozuna, who I think got screened and never saw the ball get caught by Betts in Game 5. But the Game 7, how do you run on contact on a ground ball to third base? That's just awful base running. And the second and third, nobody out. They didn't get anything more out of that inning. And I will tell you that I live bet the Dodgers right after that half inning. Even at a price that wasn't that good, they were behind, and there was still minus 110, I think. And I threw a live bet on the Dodgers because it's like the Braves just blew this game and blew this series. I don't think Tampa's going to make those mistakes. Tampa's a smart baseball team.
Well, Dave, you talk about you're giving the edge to Tampa as far as the managing goes, and for that reason,
I would give them that. I would give them that edge basically against anybody. It's not a rip on Roberts. I think Cash has proven that he's the best in-game manager in the game.
Well, Steve, when you've been on this show a couple times with me, we've discussed some of these strikeout props, and I have the stats for Glasnow in the playoffs and for Kershaw. The number for both of them is 6.5, heavily juiced at a couple spots that I've looked at to the over. And I actually would look towards the under at a short dog price here for Glasnow. I think the Dodgers are actually going to have extremely intense at-bats, and if they're going to go out, it's going to be a pop fly, it's going to be an infield ball. And I look at the story of both these teams, how they got here, and we can say, hey, maybe the Dodgers just barely scraped by, but it was a pretty dominant, final game for them to make it here. And every single at bat for them, I know that, Brian, I think it was you that said that they were swinging for the moon. Everything was a home run shot. But it seemed to me something just clicked with them where they got a little more smart with their at bats. And they started actually trying to, swing on contact and actually make quality at bats. I'm looking at the glass now under 6.5. I've noticed that the longer these playoffs have progressed, the more these under and Ks have actually been cashing in. And, it's very Joe Public to love betting overs and love betting favorites and love betting overs and strikeouts. And I found the success has actually turned towards the under because Glass now could have a great, great game and Cash could pull him. And all of a sudden he's at 6 and needs one more. Does that make any sense to you, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with you. As you said, they're both 6.5. Glasgow is kind of a pick 'em. Kershaw like over 160 plus 130 on the take back of the under. But yeah, I'd be more comfortable with Glass now on the under 6.5 than asking him to try to get 7 or more because I think the bullpens are fresh, as Dave and Brian say. The rest isn't much of a factor here. Both teams should be ready to go here. The Dodgers, of course, have just 1 day off, but they stay in the same stadium as we talked about. Tampa, 2 days off, but they had to travel. I think one thing that's interesting to me, we talk about momentum a lot of times during the season, how it's hard to handicap. Some use it more than others, but you look at the Dodgers, they're down 0-2 in the series, but they had that huge outburst at the end of Game 2. And we talked about it before Game 3. Would it carry over? Well, it obviously carried over because they put up 11 runs in the first inning of Game 3 and coasted to that 15-3 win. And then look what happened in Game 4. They get blown out 10-2 because they had nothing to play for the rest of Game 3. They came out flat. So the question is, does that momentum from the big come from behind winning Game 7 carry over? I think it very well could, especially with just 1 day off and remaining in the same ballpark that they're very familiar with. So that's another reason, Andrew, I would lean towards the under 6.5. I could see them getting to Glass now early. Big picture, guys, by the way, when the season, back into June, I logged the odds here. Before the season began, Dodgers 4-1 favorite. Obviously, the Yankees were 4-1 as well. Astros were 10-1. They were the third favorite. Twins 15, Braves 17-1, and then the Rays 22-1, Nationals 25-1. So, Tampa was in the mix, but they were only the third favorite in the American League when the season started a few months ago. If you look at the overall stats for the season, I'd like to look at road games only, regular season games, as you all know. Tampa right behind the Dodgers. I think they were 4th overall in home runs on the road. Dodgers were 1st. Batting average, Tampa was actually a few spots ahead of the Dodgers. OPS, the Dodgers a few spots ahead of Tampa. But then keep in mind, we talked about this with the Braves. Tampa played the AL East and the NL East. They played a much tougher schedule. The Dodgers played the NL West, which was decent, but then the AL West, which was not, because the Astros weren't playing at the level they did in the postseason. So when you start factoring a tougher schedule, you can make an argument that these stats are almost equal. And that surprised me because the Dodgers, we know, is a potent offensive team. We think of Tampa, how they kind of struggled in the postseason, got by low-scoring wins with that pitching staff. But if that offense shows up, this might be a closer series than we realize.
And Steve, you talked about it all season long about looking at betting this Dodgers team, not just on the money line, on the run line, -1.5 runs. Is that applicable here in the World Series based off these odds we're seeing here?
Yeah, normally I'd say no, it's different because postseason games are lower scoring and the bullpen is used extensively. But then again, we saw that a lot in the regular season with these bullpens being used. But I wouldn't have thought it would hold up, but it really has. I mean, once again, we look at the results. The Dodgers lost the 3 games to the Braves by combined score. Let's see, what was it? They lost by a combined score of 23-10 in those 3 games. Their 4 wins all came by 2 runs or more, except for the Game 7 win by 1. They won by 1, 2, 12, and 4. And then you look back at the games against San Diego, a 4-run and a 9-run win and 1 1-run win. So, I mean, once again, you've been much better off playing the -1.5 plus money or taking the dog outright. It's amazing how that continues to work. But it makes a lot of sense because it's a potent offensive team that lives and dies by the home run. And surprisingly, Tampa did that more than you realized, too, when you look at the stats.
And Steve, I think that exact same example that you just used as far as those go with the run line, maybe all but 2 of those victories would categorize in the team total over as well with this Dodgers team. Most of the time when they're winning their games, they're getting at minimum 5 runs. Dave?
How much concern is there for the health of Bellinger, who injured his shoulder celebrating the other night?
Crazy.
And I mean, it's his right shoulder, so obviously he can still throw, but that's still for a
No,
left-handed
even if
hitter,
it's while
there's
you're
still,
throwing shoulder, that still is a nag, 100%. It takes your
sure.
full body.
And I just wonder, I don't know. I have no way to handicap this particularly, but I would think it's a bit of a concern. I mean, he popped the shoulder out. So I don't think a couple of days off can't be 100%. And you wonder if that's going to have an effect. And we know how important Bellinger is in this lineup, both on offense and defense. He's made a couple of great catches in the outfield. Something like that. I can't put a dollar value on it as far as the price is concerned. It's not like lower the price because I don't know about the health of Bellinger, but it's not a plus for the Dodgers. I can tell you that.
Well, he's come out and said this has happened 3 or 4 times in the past. He says it's very painful when it pops. It's very painful when you put it back in. But after that, I'm assuming it's sore, but he thinks he's going to be able to play, and it's not going to happen.
Oh, he's going to play. I'm sure he's going to play.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder if it has any impact on him.
Yeah.
No, one thing that's very interesting,
him.
guys. Sorry,
I'd
Steve.
stay away from him on the MVP odds. He's anywhere from 10 to 12 to 1. He's only like the 5th or 6th guy on that list. I mean, that would be enough for me to keep him off my MVP list. Betts and Seager are ahead of him. I think they look stronger because of that. One thing I wanted to point out on those odds, guys, Kershaw's like the 3rd guy. Charlie Morton, in some of the sharper offshore books, Morton is like the 5th guy there. He's ahead of Snell. He's ahead of Glasgow. Very strange. I mean, Morton is at like 10 to 1 to win MVP, and he's not even.
Well, I know one thing. If it goes to a 7th game,
that's right.
Find a way to get Charlie Morton out there because he's 4-0 with an ERA of less than like 0 point something in winner take all games. Talk about a great.
Yeah,
those are
stats you gotta love. Those are stats you can't hide from.
But Dave, I tell you what it is. Because Snell's going in game 2, I believe. So I think it would be Morton in 3 and 7. And I think that's exactly the logic, is that he could win a game 7 for him. It's crazy.
Why not? He's proving, and you can call it a small sample if you want, because four games is small. Tells me that guy is super. And what would make it even more interesting, kind of hope it happens just to see what does happen. What would make it even more interesting is it's a good possibility it's the last game he ever pitches in the major leagues, because Morton's hinted at retirement. He's had some physical issues. He's not young by any means. Can you imagine that being his last game in the majors, a game 7, winner take all?
I think that's how most people want to go out, Dave.
Oh, I don't know. No, most of them are way too long. They just do. I mean, the best player I ever saw was Willie Mays. Willie Mays is the best player I've ever seen. Well, and he was awful at the end of his career. He just wouldn't. They had to kick him out of the game, basically. And that's unfortunately the way most of them go out.
Another comment here from TJ that I thought was quite interesting. Dave, I kind of, I've made a habit of picking your brain about these, although you don't really bet them too much. But don't you guys think Roberts will have a quicker hook with Kershaw since he left him in too long against the Braves, or does that matter? We can't handicap that, Dave, but is it something to ever take into account?
I don't know. Because Cash is actually more predictable than Roberts. He has basically follows and it works. I mean, it's like what happened with Morton the other day. Guy's pitching great baseball. I mean, he's dominating. He gives up an infield hit. That's it. He's out of the game because Cash was looking for whatever he was looking for, and he doesn't hesitate at that point. He goes to the bullpen and didn't bring in. I thought, I'm sitting there. This is the difference between Kevin Cash and me, for instance. I'm sitting there going, well, Glasnow or Yarbrough here. No, he's just going with his bullpen guys who are used to that role, and it worked perfectly. They gave up runs, but it worked. And I think Glasnow was in the up just for show. I don't think he was in the game, to be honest with you. So I kind of know what Cash is going to do. I think if he gets more out of Glasnow, that's a bonus. But I think Glasnow, the whole idea is Glasnow for 5 innings, and then we're turning it over to the bullpen.
Yeah.
I don't know what Roberts is going to do because he's been unpredictable in the postseason before. And I think that's a negative. I've learned over the years that unpredictability is not a plus when it comes to you want the guys who kind of know what they're going to do before they do it. They've got the whole game mapped out. It's like a great pool player. The difference between me and a great pool player is I can make most shots on a pool table, but I can't see 3 or 4 shots down the road. That's why I'm a very average pool player. The real good pool players, they can see they're not even looking at the shot they're making. They're looking at shots 3 or 4 shots down the road. I can't do that. that's the difference to me between the great coaches and managers and the ordinary ones. And it's why I put Cash in the great category and Roberts not so much.
Yeah, having said that, I think having, a good ability to have the improv is good, but it's good to have a plan coming in. And I think that plan that you just orchestrated and said for Cash is accurate, and hopefully will be one to help me cash that glass now unders. Dave, we'll get your closing thoughts on this game, then Brian, then Steve.
I made the price lower than it is. I made it about 150. So on line value, you can say, well, there's a little bit of line value in Tampa. But as I've mentioned before, I rarely take a play on a team that I think is going to lose the game just because I've got a little bit of value. Mm-hmm. I like the Dodgers to win tonight, but I'm not betting it at minus 170. And that's basically all I do. I'm not much on props, and I don't have a feel for the total in the game. So I'll sit this one out. Hopefully a good play will come up in game 2. But tonight I'm just going to watch and maybe try and learn how the managers are approaching this thing, and whether the players are tight or how it goes. You can get a feel for game 2 with what happens in game 1.
Yeah, Trev Bryan here. He says, what are your thoughts on the over under 7.5? Play it small. Giovanni right below him says, like the over. Look, I'm looking at an in-game wager in this one. I'm gonna feel it out, see how those guys are finding the strike zone early, what the at-bats are looking like, and then play it out like that. I wish that it was very easy to be able to set up some kind of system, guys, with clients to be able to just be like, all right, snap of a fingers right to their mobile device. They see it, but it's just too hard.
Somebody asked that before.
It's too hard.
Somebody asked it before. I don't remember who it was. Sorry about that. But they asked me could I tweet these out, these live bets out. I can't. There's no time for it because I'm on my screen looking to see where my best live odds are at like 6 or 7 books that I have that offer in game. And by the time I find the best one and enter it, I'm barely getting it in myself. So there's no way to tweet it out.
Yeah. Brian?
Second halves, you can do that in football with second half wagers because there's more time. You get a nice 15-minute break, or in a hockey or a basketball game. But baseball, it's basically that 2-minute break between innings, and that's the end of it.
Brian?
I want to get back to your strikeout. You were talking about strikeouts earlier. There's 30 teams in Major League Baseball. The Dodgers were 27th in strikeouts, 471, but they led Major League Baseball with 118 home runs. That's 15 more than second place Atlanta. You take a look at the Rays, they had 80 home runs, which is pretty much somewhere in the middle, but they led the league in strikeouts at 608, and that was 26 more than the Brewers, another team that strikes out a lot. We made a lot of money going against those teams for the strikeout props. So it wasn't just a short series that we saw Tampa Bay do it. It's been a season-long thing where this team just strikes out too many times for as many times as they hit that long ball. And for the Dodgers to be such good hitters, they got 256 batting average, which was 18 points higher than the Rays, and they don't strike out, and they're able to hit all these home runs. That's a talented group. And a lot of times you see these high-priced teams that have a lot of dead weight on them. We see this all the time in other sports where you're just trying to, like in hockey, you try to trade the dead weight in order to help your team, and you got to give up some draft choices to do it. The Dodgers are one of those teams that they got a huge payroll, but just about everybody contributes, and that's what makes this Dodgers team so good for the last 4 years.
Steve, before we throw it to you, somebody mentioned here, Mr. Gogster said no run first inning hit at minus 135 FanDuel. Couple guys talking about that. I've actually had success with that one as well in the first game of series. And then I find that later on, and as the series progresses, and I mentioned it a few times on the show, that as the series progresses, we'll see that kind of cash a little bit more. And I think it's comfortability maybe, or getting to know the teams or the film. I'm not sure really what it is. But I'd actually look towards that as well. And realistically, you're not always getting a good price like that with a prop bet like that in the first inning, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this year these teams didn't face each other like they maybe would have in previous seasons, so none of the hitters have seen the pitchers. So it does help you a little bit with game 1 here, I guess, and any game going forward, to be honest. Dodgers, once again, familiar with this park. Tampa's not. Something else maybe to factor in. Look at your strikeout props once again, Andrew. It's interesting. Glasnow, The one thing that concerns me, I think he's had like 8 strikeouts or more basically in like 6 of his last 10 games, 7 or more, and I think 8 of those 10. But guess what? The 2 he hasn't have been the last 2 starts, 5 and 2 strikeouts.
Mhm.
Of course, he only went 2 innings in that one a couple ago. That probably won't be the case tonight. Kershaw, meanwhile, though, has not been great. He has just 6 and 4 strikeouts his last 2 starts. He actually has 6 or less in 4 of his last 5 outings. So I'd probably, lean under Kershaw plus money as well, especially with his dicey postseason history. Something we didn't talk a lot about was hits, and Brian just talked about how there's no dead weight on this Dodgers team, and I totally agree. They've had 9 hits or more in 8 of their last 9 games. The Rays have had 7 hits or less in 8 of their last 9 games. And that's one of the reasons they're 8-1 to the under. If they've given up more than 2 runs, they have not won a game the last 9. So they have to have a low-scoring game. We didn't talk about the first 5 innings line much, but going back to the over-under, 3.5 to 4, but there's a lot of 3.5s out there. The full game is 7.5 under. So the odds are basically saying the first 5 innings will be lower scoring than the last 4. I don't necessarily agree with that just because
Neither
those
do
teams
I.
have good bullpens. So I thought that's a little strange as well. There are 4s out there which make it 4, 3.5, but there's some 3.5s which make it 3.5, 4 with less innings. So something to think about if you're looking at the total tonight.
And Steve, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but those 3.5 first 5 innings, they seem to be over City. I mean, no matter who's out
Matt
there.
Matt Josephs loves to say, one bad inning, one bad half inning by either team out of the 10 half innings, and you're kind of screwed when you're looking for 3 runs or less. I know Matt loves to say that, and I agree with him on that.
Definitely.
I think it's a great point you made, though, on and I think Brian and myself both agree on the bullpens. These are both good bullpens. And
they're rested.
And the other thing is, if it's a close game, if this game's, 3-3 in the 8th inning, nobody's playing for a big inning. You'll see teams playing small ball down the stretch, so that lessens the chances of a crooked number going up on the scoreboard. I think you could make a case for some kind of an in-game under, depending on how things go early.
I would agree as well. If we start seeing these guys get a little bit shaky or a little bit rocked, even the 2nd or 3rd inning, Dave, and that's the funny thing. I think we see people on Twitter all the time jumping in on this over just because, a couple guys are on base. I look the same way as you. For things to kind of settle down a little bit. But as far as that first inning prop, I actually will endorse that, and I do like that first inning no score. I find those props to be quite interesting. Guys, any closing thoughts here? Packages up. We got baseball. Dave says college football. We're going to cross our fingers. No more college cancellations for Dave. We'll have a good week with that. But I guess that's it for now, guys.
I think I added them up. I think I'm up to 9 games that I've bet so far that got postponed in college football. So that's the way it goes. I have 3 college football games up right now. One of them is a free play. So just go to my homepage at WagerTalk to check that out. I'll add some golf tomorrow. Probably won't do much this week. 17-5-1 on the golf matchups. And we'll dig into the Wednesday KBO in a little while and see if I can find something out there that's good.
I'm about to go golfing myself right now, hitting the link. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.
I'll take the over on that.
1 p.m. Yeah, as long as I get a snowman on each hole, that's the most I'll go. So that's the goal. Anyway, guys, have a great night. Enjoy the games, guys. Thanks so much for being so active in the chat box. For Steve, for Brian, for